if we're looking at the habit loop, really we start off by having a cue, right? Everything that happens in our day-to-day starts with a cue. There's some type of trigger that ignites what's going to happen next. And sometimes it is that decision that we made previously, right, that has led to that. So it could be, you know, your own personal decision that is going to kick off that cue. And usually that cue is emotion based, right? So I like to kind of draw it out and just say it's an emotion, right? Or it's a feeling. Oh, my pen's not working here. It's doing weird stuff. All right, that says emotion, right? Or it's a feeling that is happening, okay? Once we have that cue, then it's going to trigger a craving. So I want you to think in terms of Pavlov's dogs. Has everyone knows what Pavlov's dogs is, right? I think we all do by now. Yep. So basically he did this wonderful little assignment where he rang a bell and fed the dogs, did that enough to where when he rang that bell, his cue, right, his trigger, they instantly started craving the food. So then they would start salivating. Before they even had the food, the body's response was to start salivating. So we're gonna come back to this, but I'm just gonna pull this screen over just a little bit so I have some space. And this is why, right? You have your brain, which that's the best brain ever, right? Which I've never claimed to be an artist, you guys. Never claimed to be an artist. But the language of the brain is thoughts, right? It speaks through words and it's rational and intellectual. That's great. Well, it only accounts for 10% of what we do throughout our day to day. 10% of the control that we actually have over ourselves and our actions. We have the brain, the body, which is really the headless horseman over here, right? And its language is feelings. And we've talked about this before, but this is what's going on in Pavlov's dogs, right? The brain isn't even involved. It's just cue that bell and the body starts reacting because the body has associated bell with food, bell with food, bell with food. And so we're the exact same way. So I want you to think in terms of like these different cues that happen constantly throughout your day. Yes, you have the ones that you set, that's not supposed to be drawn through there, but you have the ones that you set up for yourself on a day-to-day basis with these daily decisions, right? That matrix. But you also have all this wonderful stuff that's related usually to this one keyword, stress, right?
Oh, it's my buddy.
It's your buddy Stress? You guys are friends?
Yeah.
If we name
it,
if we name it and label it, it actually becomes less, I promise, right?
Okay.
So stress can manifest itself in so many different ways for us, right? So for like my nurse, it could be something with a patient, right? Really stressful, right? Or it could be, but it was because like you step into that environment and our environment matters so much. And we can overcome our environment to a certain degree, but ultimately, like, remember, 90%, because it's not 10%, 90% of everything is going to happen automatically based on the body. So if 90% is happening based on the body, we want to set that up for as much control as possible. And so a lot of times that means changing our environment. But sometimes you can't. You can't change like what doctor is going to be there, who's going to be in your life, and those types of things, right? So we just need to understand this model so that we can understand what to do with it. So we have some kind of craving that is going to kick off based on our previous history of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we have given to it. So in the case of Pavlov's dogs, it's salivating, instantly feeling hungry. They may not even be hungry. It's why you cannot be hungry, step into the kitchen, and all of a sudden you get that like, oof, I'm starting to feel hungry. Because your body's triggered response based on the cue is to eat when you step into that area with the refrigerator. Or you're really full at a restaurant, you just overate, and then they bring the dessert tray and you see your favorite dessert. You see tiramisu and you're like, I got this little bit of space all of a sudden out of nowhere, then I could really eat that. I could have a little dessert. Like 2 minutes ago, you were saying I don't have that. Well, it's the brain, like just taking a response from the body. and the information is coming up, it's not going down. We've lost all rational ability right now, right? After the craving, then we have a few other things happen. I'm actually going to flip this because I feel like it'll help you more, right? So before we go into the third piece, we're going to dive into the fourth piece, which is the reward. So after you've had this craving happen, all your brain is now thinking is give me the reward. So if you had a doctor come in, trigger you, because they said something that you know wasn't going to serve the patient to the best ability right then, right? It was not about the patient, it was about their ego and whatever. We're just using a random example. That triggers you, that frustrates you, right? And in your past, if you've been frustrated, then you go take it out, right? And we don't have these other outlets. We don't have these other ways of dealing with it. And we've always dealt with it in the past by then just allowing stuff to just get buried deep or just bottling it up. Then eventually it's going to want to come out, and we're going to need to deal with the emotions that are related to that. So if you've just been put down, you've been yelled at by someone, you're going to get a craving for some kind of way to alleviate that. Because right now, that cue, you being yelled at, any of these things, you feel like I'm not good enough because they're not listening to me. I'm not being heard. My feelings aren't being met. I'm not worthy. And so then that's all happening in the body. So now the brain takes over that little 10%. And it says, well, I'll make you feel better. We want to make you feel better. That's all we're here to do, is to save energy, build habits so we can like keep you alive with as little energy as possible and make you feel better. So how are we going to do that? And for most people, coming down to that is food. Yep. Right. And it could be wine. It could be social media. It could be a lot of other things. And it's not that food is bad. Food is wonderful, but we want to be able to enjoy it guilt-free. So what ends up happening is that, right, usually if it's stress related, like you got yelled at, you had a bad day, you haven't done anything like that, typically it's going to be salty, crunchy, or alcohol. Because those salty, crunchy, alcohol type things, like based on their actual chemicals, they're going to release the two best feel in your system, right? Dopamine and serotonin. All right. And so that's all that it's doing. Now, if you've got on the other end of things, say someone like comes around at work and they're like, no, we don't really need you for this project. And you were thinking like, oh man, I thought I was an integral part of this team. That's the cue that's going to elicit a craving of feeling needed, right? You have this relationship and they're in their own little world and you're talking to them and they don't talk back to you. Like this is a real example that just happened to April and I like last week. I'm like talking to her. She's kind of ignoring me. Like, I'm like really kind of confused. I'm not understanding. And I'm thinking like, damn, she's upset at me. Like things aren't going to be good. Like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, and then I start to like create these stories inside my own head. Right. And so I start craving connection and I find myself just scrolling social media. Serves me no good. But what am I doing? I'm looking for the reward of connection. Right. And then I put my phone down. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, hey, is everything okay? Like you seem like something's going on. She's like, oh, I'm just, I was dealing with some anxiety based on some stuff that I have to set up with dental stuff for Miles and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, okay. So I created an entire story, right, in my own head. And how often do we do this, right? That wasn't even real. But I caught it while realizing, oh man, I was just instantly going to the reward, which was to feel connected. So often when people want to feel connected, right, they'll end up feeling depressed and wanting to feel connected. Then that's when sugar, chocolate, that's when those types of food cravings really start to kick in, right? And you're like Pavlov's dogs. We all are, right? And it may not be with food. That's why I use the social media example. Yep. Is that helpful? Okay. So right here now, it brings me to our last one, which is actually in the middle, which is the response. So we have this loop that just happens. After you have, supposed to be an arrow, right? After you have that craving, it looks like a broken penis. So it's Coach Joseph. What do you expect, right? But we have a response that has been programmed in from some long-term history or relationship with that food item, whatever it is, right? And all that response's job is to get us to the reward. And then that reward, right, is going to get that release. So then it's going to just program us even deeper so that the next time that same trigger happens, the same thing is going to repeat itself. And this is why so often, right, I'm feeling like really depressed. I'm feeling kind of lonely. Like, I don't know what to do. It happens mostly on the weekends because during the week, we're really busy and we have this structure called work, right? We may do too much of it. It may not be serving to us overall. We may not actually like it. A Gallup study showed that 40% of people absolutely hate what they do 90% of the time. 70% of people just dislike what they do, which tells me most Americans dislike what they're doing for work. Only about 30% truly love it. The rest of people, they only enjoy it about 10% of their actual working hours, right? And that's probably like, you know, for my nurses that are like truly like love what they do and helping people, you still have all of the wonderful things like dealing with the doctors and certain patients and charts, and that makes up that part and that percentage that we just don't enjoy part of our job. It's inevitable, right? So we have that happen, and it's going to cue off this craving. And then we're going to have the response of like on the weekends, because now I don't know what to do with my free time, but I'm feeling like kind of depressed and lonely. And I wish I had people that I don't have structure. Structure equals freedom, my friends. And so then we have this response, right? Which is to eat and drink too much, gives us the reward, this instant dopamine hit. Oh, I'm feeling a little bit better. I way overate, but my brain is saying you feel better while you're eating this. But it's dopamine, don't forget. The moment it's in your system, it's pretty much gone. And then you're immediately chasing the next dopamine hit. So now you're feeling bad about yourself. You're feeling guilty for eating all of this stuff. You're like, why did I do that? Your brain goes, hey, that's your body's response coming up. That's that 90%. It's controlling the feelings. You're feeling bad, right? That's the body that's speaking to you. I'm the brain. I'll be in control. I'll give you what I can, the 10%. I know how to make you feel better. Ice cream. That's the fastest way to make you feel better. Ice cream. So now we go and eat ice cream. Cue, right? Craving, response, reward. I got the ice cream. Now I'm feeling really good. 10 minutes later, I feel guilt and shame. Now I feel really, really bad about myself. I'm never doing this again. The next morning, still feeling, you get what I'm saying? And then we level of disgust. Disgust is not a bad thing. Disgust is a good thing, because disgust is when you look in the mirror and you go, okay, no more, 100%. So it's actually a powerful, wonderful thing if we're able to utilize it for that. Problem is we get going with a little bit of it and then we fall back off because of this, because it's pre-programmed. So the reason I saved, right? I'm going to do it as another square inside of a square. The reason I saved response for the last one is because it's the only thing that you can really change. It is the most powerful piece. Because I can't change, right, how this stress is going to manifest throughout the day. I can choose to do things like meditate. I can choose to do things like changing the decision matrix of my day-to-day. Yes, I have some power and some control in those things, but I can't control the 90% that my body is going to feel, right? I can't control my feelings that are going to happen when someone comes in and is just like really difficult and a prick, or when my, son is 3 years old and he gets hangry. That is a real thing. I didn't really fully believe hangry was a real thing until I had a toddler, and I'm like, no, it really is amazing. So empathy to anyone I ever kind of like batted an eye when you told me you were hangry and passed in the day. So Sarah's like, yeah, probably me, right? I don't know. But we can't control the cues. We can't control the negative stuff that is going to be slung our way in the situations. We can control our reactions, sure, but our body's feelings, the initial reaction, right, which is the feeling, this we can't control. That is a flood of emotions that are embodied through chemical release in our system, things just like dopamine and serotonin, but coming in other ways that we can't fully control. But the nice thing is that lasts about 90 seconds, that flood, unless we bring thought, conscious thought to it, then we're fueling it to continue it as it's going. But it means that we can control this response to the best of our abilities, if we're able to catch it. And this is why at the beginning we talked about awareness is what's going to precede the change, right? Awareness is what is going to allow us have some control over this response. So if we're able to say, like, I recognize when I get triggered, my craving is to go for a bag of Doritos, a bottle of wine, a carton of ice cream, a, you know, social media phone. Like, I have a friend and she calls it stroking her lover. Like, she's literally, she's like, when I find myself stroking my lover right here, I know I've got, yeah, it's a pretty bad example. You get what I'm saying, right? And not mine. I took it from her, but that's where we're in some other land of not reality, right? So what can we control with this response? And it's knowing that the response is going to just try and get us still to this reward. That's the powerful piece. So now in our control, we can do a lot of wonderful things with this, right? We can say, well, what else is going to give me what is going on to get that reward? So is it going for a walk, right? Will that do it? I don't know. Depends on you, right? Is it calling a friend? If it's a connection thing, right? Do you need connection? Cool. Call a friend. Send a text message. Tell them you appreciate them, right? Is it just creating space? How about, like, even if you can't go for a walk, go outside because you realize, oh, wait, I live in Southern California, Arizona, Washington. These are some really cool places that have, like, pretty decent weather this time of year. And it may be warm or it may still be a little bit cold, but it's nice. And I can get some trees and some scenery and some greenery and I can instantly feel better, right? Because if we're chasing one of these emotions, it is about chasing them here. And what we chase will run. That's the funny thing. But what we immerse ourselves in, we become. What we chase, we will run. What we immerse ourselves in, we become. And so I want you to just start to think right now, what is the habit loop, right, that is happening for you that isn't serving you?